Tucked deep in the barren mountains of Florence, Colorado, stands a fortress so secure that it has never had a successful escape. The locals call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. To the world, it's the ADX Florence Federal Supermax Prison, home to the most dangerous and violent offenders in the United States. This isn't a correctional facility. It's a vault for men who can't exist in society, or even among other prisoners. Built in 1994, ADX Florence was the government's response to decades of chaos inside U.S. prisons. Riots, gang wars, and assassinations behind bars. Here, there are no second chances, no prison yards filled with chatter. Every movement is planned, every breath recorded. From the moment a new inmate arrives, they are stripped of identity, of sound, of color. It's said that the moment you pass through its gates, you don't just lose your freedom, you lose your mind. The prison holds just under 400 men, each locked inside a 7 by 12-foot concrete cell. Their beds, desks, and stools are molded into the walls, leaving nothing to break or use as a weapon. The doors are made of steel, solid, soundproof, and remotely operated from a control center. Each inmate eats alone, sleeps alone, and exercises alone in a small concrete pen resembling an empty swimming pool. The only view is a patch of sky framed by razor wire. There are no bars to look through, only narrow vertical slits of glass angled upward, so they can't see the horizon or another human being. Among those who are called ADX home are the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, Boston Marathon bomber Jakar Tsarnaev, 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui, cartel leader El Chapo Guzmán, and the Oklahoma City bomber Terry Nichols. Each name represents a story that shaped America's darkest chapters. But inside ADX, they are not legends. They are ghosts, silenced by concrete and control. Even the guards speak in hushed tones. Cameras line every corner, recording 24/7. The air hums with the sound of vents and footsteps echoing down sterile hallways. Inmates communicate only by shouting through drains or sending coded knocks through walls. Some carve notes into toilet paper. Others whisper into air vents hoping someone will hear. Loneliness becomes a second sentence, one that slowly erodes a mind. In 2007, a former warden described ADX as a clean version of hell. He admitted that some men are so isolated, they start talking to insects that crawl through their cells. Their only contact with living creatures. Psychiatrists say the brain begins to deteriorate after months without human contact. Some inmates pace for hours, tracing invisible lines across their cells until exhaustion claims them. Others withdraw completely, motionless, silent, consumed by despair. Yet, ADX is not chaos. It is precision-built control. Each door, camera, and motion detector works like clockwork. Lights flicker on at exactly 5 a.m., meals arrive on time to the second, and guards follow the same pattern of steps every shift. To the outside world, it's discipline. But to those inside, it's psychological warfare, a reminder that time itself belongs to the system. For the world's most dangerous men, ADX Florence is a final stop, the end of all roads. It's not designed for reform. It's designed for silence. And yet, even in this fortress of concrete and control, rumors began to circulate. Whispers that some inmates had found a way to communicate, a way to defy the isolation itself. When the guards discovered what they were doing, the truth stunned everyone. They call it a supermax for a reason. Every sound, every movement, every breath is monitored. But no matter how perfect the system seems, human nature always finds cracks to slip through. And at ADX Florence, even the most dangerous men in America have found ways to push back against total control. It began with whispers. Messages passed through air vents and drain pipes, a code language formed out of desperation. Inmates like Ramzi Yousef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber, would spend months alone without seeing another person. Yet somehow, information still flowed through the walls. Guards later discovered that prisoners were knocking on concrete walls in rhythm, like a primitive Morse code, sending messages one cell at a time through the silence. These weren't random conversations. They were strategies, connections, alliances. Some inmates planned lawsuits, others coordinated hunger strikes, and a few, incredibly, managed to smuggle letters out to the media. Even in isolation, the human mind refused to be silent. But communication wasn't the only crack in the system. Mental breakdowns began spreading through facility like an invisible disease. Psychiatrists who visited ADX described inmates talking to themselves, screaming for hours, or tearing apart their clothes. One former inmate claimed that the sound of doors slamming and the hum of air vents could drive a man insane. Inmates who had once run entire criminal empires, cartel bosses, gang leaders, terrorists, now pace in circles in their cells, counting the lines on the walls to remind themselves they were still alive. The punishment wasn't physical pain. It was psychological decay. Even some guards began to feel the weight of the silence. One correctional officer later admitted, "It's like walking through a graveyard where everyone's alive." The monotony, the routine, and the pressure to maintain control created its own kind of madness. Some guards requested transfers after just a few months. The silence got into their heads too. Despite the prison's reputation for order, incidents still happened. In 2012, a group of inmates managed to coordinate a protest from inside solitary confinement, refusing meals, flooding cells, and blocking door slots with bedding. It wasn't about escape. It was about being heard. For years, the men inside had been writing letters to courts and human rights organizations, claiming that ADX conditions were pushing them past the edge of sanity. That same year, a former inmate named Thomas Silverstein, who had been in solitary for more than 3 decades, described his existence as a slow death by loneliness. He claimed to have gone years without hearing another human voice directly. Silverstein's name became infamous among correctional officers, a symbol of both fear and endurance. Then came the lawsuits. A class action case filed in 2012 accused the federal government of cruel and unusual punishment, citing severe psychological harm among prisoners. The case revealed shocking details. Men who self-mutilated, who screamed through nights, and who begged to be moved to facilities where they could at least see another person. The government settled quietly, agreeing to transfer some inmates to mental health units. But the damage was done. The world had caught a glimpse behind the concrete curtain. For decades, ADX had been marketed as an impenetrable symbol of justice, a place where America's worst disappeared forever. But the cracks were now visible. Behind those sealed doors, human beings were breaking in slow motion, and the world was beginning to ask, how much punishment is too much? Even as the lawsuits faded, the system held strong. The prison's walls stood tall, its windows angled toward the sky, so no one could see out or in. But within that silence, something darker began to stir. A whisper of rebellion, a flicker of humanity that refused to die. And soon, the outside world would get a chilling reminder that even inside America's most secure prison, control is never absolute. Because in 2015, one of the most notorious inmates to ever walk the earth, El Chapo Guzmán, would arrive at ADX Florence, and his presence would test the fortress like never before. When Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán, the world's most infamous drug lord, arrived at ADX Florence in 2019, the message was clear. No one escapes the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This was the man who had twice tunneled out of maximum security prisons in Mexico, once through a mile-long underground passage built directly beneath his cell. But in Colorado, there would be no tunnels, no outside contacts, no bribes. Here, even the air was monitored. El Chapo was placed under what officials call Special Administrative Measures, SAMs. It meant total isolation. No phone calls, no visits, no letters except those screened by federal agents. The man who once commanded an empire of billions was now confined to a 7 by 12-foot cell, lit by fluorescent light that never fully dimmed. His meals were pushed through a slot in the door. His yard time was an hour alone in a concrete cage slightly larger than the cell, with walls so high he could only see the sky. Guards watched every move through cameras. His conversations, if any, were recorded. And yet, despite his silence, the world still whispered his name. For the first time, even El Chapo Guzmán, a man who controlled armies, was completely powerless. But El Chapo wasn't the only ghost in those halls. Nearby, other names filled the cell blocks. Ramzi Yousef, Zacharias Moussaoui, Terry Nichols, Ted Kaczynski, men whose crimes had rewritten history. Together, they formed a gallery of America's darkest minds, each locked away from light, from sound, from humanity itself. Former guards say ADX is a unique atmosphere, an emptiness that presses against your chest. Every hallway looks the same: sterile concrete, buzzing lights, doors without faces. Some officers admit they sometimes forget there are men behind those walls. It's like guarding shadows, one said. You hear nothing, you see nothing, but you know they're there. Even inside a fortress built for control, the system still felt the strain. Over the years, there have been suicides, mental collapses, and desperate acts of self-harm. Reports emerge of inmates banging their heads against walls, tearing sheets into ropes, and writing pleas for help with blood or toothpaste. These weren't rumors. They were documented signs of a system so strict it stripped men of the will to exist. Human rights advocates call it the cleanest form of cruelty. The architecture itself is designed to erase the idea of freedom. From the narrow windows to the seamless hallways, everything at ADX reminds you that you're no longer part of the world. Some psychologists compare long-term isolation to brain trauma. The brain begins to rewire itself in the absence of social contact, producing paranoia, hallucinations, and emotional numbness. Yet, the Bureau of Prisons defends ADX as a necessary response to unmanageable violence. And in a way, they're right. This is where the most dangerous men in America go when all else fails. Inside, there are no riots, no fights, no chaos. Only silence. Perfect, endless silence. For many, ADX is a symbol of justice done right, a place where the worst of the worst pay the ultimate price. But for others, it's proof that justice can go too far, that even monsters are still human, and that total isolation is not discipline, but destruction. Today, as the sun rises over the Rocky Mountains, the fortress still stands, its concrete walls glowing pale against the snow. Inside, nearly 400 men wake to another day without sound, without faces, without freedom. ADX Florence doesn't just cage bodies. It cages minds. It erases identity, emotion, and memory, until even the most powerful men are reduced to silence. And that's the truth behind the Alcatraz of the Rockies. No one escapes it. Not in body, not in mind,